My billionaire ex-husband flaunted his fertile marriage to shame me until the reunion doctor spoke and my twins called me mummy. They're not yours, Lena. They can't be. You're the one who couldn't give me children. Remember? Caleb Wright's voice rang across the ballroom, sharp and desperate, as 200 pairs of eyes locked onto the scene unfolding at Harborcrest Medical Institute's 5th anniversary gala. His face had turned the color of ash as he stared at the 5-year-old twins standing beside me, their small hands gripping mine. I watched him stumble backward, nearly knocking into his pregnant wife Vanessa, who stood frozen in her designer gown, one hand protectively over her belly, the other covering her mouth in shock. That's when Dr. Samuel Rowan stepped forward from the crowd, a manila folder in his weathered hands, his voice carrying the weight of undeniable truth. Actually, Caleb, I think it's time everyone here knew the real story. The one documented in the medical records you paid me to bury 6 years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Caleb's eyes went wide with panic. Samuel, don't. The records that prove, Dr. Rowan continued, his calm tone cutting through Caleb's desperation like a scalpel, that you were diagnosed with severely compromised sperm quality and motility. That your fertility specialist gave you less than a 5% chance of natural conception. That Lena was cleared as completely fertile. And that you chose to tell everyone, including Lena herself, that SHE was the infertile one. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's face drained of color as she turned to stare at her husband. Camera flashes erupted from every corner. The twins looked up at me with confused expressions, and I knelt down to their level, shielding them from the chaos. Mummy, Noah whispered, his voice small and frightened, why is everyone looking at us? I pulled both children close, my heart breaking and soaring all at once, and whispered back, because the truth, baby, is finally louder than the lies. If you've ever been blamed for something that wasn't your fault, if you've ever had someone rewrite your story to protect themselves, then you need to hear what happened next. Hit that subscribe button right now because this is a story about vindication, about motherhood, and about the moment when DNA becomes the most honest witness in the room. Let's go back to where this all began. 6 years earlier, I was Lena Moore Wright, pediatric nurse at Brightwell City's most prestigious hospital, and wife to Dr. Caleb Wright, the brilliant neurosurgeon whose face graced medical journals and whose charm could light up any room he entered. We were the golden couple. At least, that's what everyone thought. Behind closed doors, our marriage was crumbling under the weight of one devastating reality: we couldn't have children. Month after month, pregnancy test after pregnancy test came back negative. The hope that had once filled our home slowly turned to resentment. Doctors' appointments became battlegrounds. Each specialist visit ended the same way, with Caleb's frustration mounting and his eyes growing colder toward me. Maybe you're too stressed, Lena. Maybe if you took better care of yourself. Maybe if you weren't working such long hours. His words were careful, clinical even, but the accusation underneath was clear: this was my fault. My body was the problem. My inadequacy was stealing his dream of fatherhood. What I didn't know, what Caleb kept hidden from me, was that he had already received devastating news from his own fertility specialist. Dr. Samuel Rowan had sat across from Caleb in a private consultation room 3 months into our fertility journey and delivered results that would change everything. I'm afraid the news isn't good, Caleb. Your sperm count is severely low, and what's there shows poor motility and morphology. Based on these results, I'd estimate your chances of natural conception at less than 5%. Caleb had stared at the papers in front of him, his hands trembling. 5%. That can't be right. Run the tests again. Dr. Rowan had nodded sympathetically. We can certainly do that. But Caleb, I've been doing this for 25 years. These numbers are quite definitive. The good news is there are options. IVF with ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection, could work. Or sperm donation if you're open to it. No. Caleb's response had been immediate and sharp. No one can know about this. No one, Samuel. Do you understand? Caleb, your wife needs to know. You can't keep pursuing fertility treatment without. I'll tell her when I'm ready. Right now, I need you to keep running tests on Lena. Keep looking for problems with her. There has to be something. Dr. Rowan had hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Lena's preliminary tests show no issues. Her hormone levels are normal, her cycles are regular. Then dig deeper, Caleb had insisted, his voice taking on that commanding tone that made residents jump. There's always something. Age factors, stress markers, whatever. Just keep the focus on her while I figure this out. And that's exactly what had happened. For the next 6 months, I underwent test after test. Hormone panels. Ultrasounds. HSG procedures that left me cramping and crying. Invasive examinations that made me feel like a science experiment rather than a person. And every time, Caleb would sit beside me, holding my hand, his face arranged in sympathetic concern, while the subtext of every conversation was clear, they were looking for what was wrong with me. Your results are actually quite good, Mrs. Wright, one doctor told me after a particularly uncomfortable procedure. I don't see any reason you couldn't conceive naturally. But somehow, that never seemed to be the final word. There was always one more test, one more specialist, one more possibility to explore. Meanwhile, Caleb had secretly begun his own treatment. Hormone supplements. Lifestyle changes. Expensive vitamins and procedures designed to improve sperm quality. All of it hidden from me, all of it framed as working late or professional development conferences. The cruel irony was that his treatments were working. Slowly, incrementally, his numbers were improving. Not to normal levels, but enough that the 5% chance had crept up to maybe 8, then 10%. A long shot, but not impossible. But by then, Caleb had already committed to his narrative. He'd spent months letting friends, family, and colleagues believe that I was the reason we couldn't conceive. He'd accepted their sympathy, their supportive pats on the back, their understanding nods when he'd sigh and say, "We're trying, but you know. These things don't always work out the way we hope." Changing that story now would mean admitting he'd lied. That he'd let his wife undergo unnecessary medical procedures. That his ego had been more important than our partnership. So instead, he doubled down. The night he asked for a divorce, I remember every detail. I was working a late shift when I received a text from him, "We need to talk. When I get home." When I arrived at our apartment, it was dark except for a single lamp in the living room where Caleb sat, papers spread across the coffee table. "What's all this?" I asked, setting down my bag. He looked up at me with eyes that held no warmth, no trace of the man who'd once promised to love me in sickness and in health. "Divorce papers. I think it's time we both admitted this isn't working." My legs nearly gave out. I sank onto the couch across from him, my mind racing. "Caleb, we can keep trying. There are other options. Adoption, surrogacy, IVF. I don't want other options, Lena." He shook his head, his jaw set in that stubborn way I'd come to recognize. "I want my own children. My bloodline. And clearly, that's not something you can give me." The words hit me like physical blows. I felt tears streaming down my face before I even registered I was crying. "So that's it? 6 years of marriage and you're just done?" He stood, straightening his tie as if we were in a business meeting rather than dismantling our life together. "I've already signed. My lawyer will be in touch." He walked out that night and never came back. Within a week, he'd moved his belongings out. Within a month, the divorce was finalized. And within 3 months, he was engaged to Vanessa Sterling, a corporate lawyer whose pedigree matched his ambitions perfectly. What Caleb didn't know. What would become the most beautiful irony of this entire nightmare, was that those incremental improvements in his fertility had been enough. In our last desperate attempt to save our marriage, we'd spent a weekend away together. 2 months before he filed for divorce. A final effort at intimacy before everything fell apart. That weekend, against all odds, against that dismal 5 to 10% probability, we had conceived. I found out I was pregnant 6 weeks after our divorce was finalized. I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment, the one I'd moved into after Caleb kept our spacious home, staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. My first thought was joy, pure and overwhelming. My second thought was terror. I called Caleb immediately, my heart pounding. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice distracted. "Lena, this isn't a good time." "Caleb, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant." There was a long silence. Then, his voice turned cold, calculating. "That's impossible. I swear to you, it's true. I just took the test. We must have conceived during that weekend we tried to reconcile, remember? Right before you filed." Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear him thinking, weighing options, considering angles. When he spoke again, his voice made my blood run cold. "If you're pregnant, Lena, it's not mine. We both know I'm not the problem in this equation. The doctors confirmed it was you. So whoever you've been seeing, that's between you and him. Don't try to pin this on me. Caleb, please. I mean it, Lena. If you try to claim this baby is mine, I'll fight you. I'll drag every piece of your medical history into court. I'll prove that you're the one with fertility issues, not me. Don't make this ugly." The line went dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, understanding washing over me in devastating waves. He wasn't just denying the baby. He was threatening me. Warning me that if I pursued this, he would destroy what little reputation I had left. And I believed him. I'd seen Caleb in court before, as an expert witness. I'd watched him command a room, bend facts to his narrative, make juries believe whatever he wanted them to believe. What chance did I have against that? I made a decision in that moment that would shape the next 6 years of my life. I would raise this child alone. I would protect them from a father who valued his reputation more than truth. I would build a life that didn't require Caleb Wright's validation or support. What I didn't know yet was that I wasn't carrying one child. I was carrying 2. The ultrasound at 8 weeks revealed the truth, twins. A boy and a girl. "Well," the ultrasound technician said with a smile, "looks like you hit the jackpot. 2 healthy heartbeats." I stared at the screen, watching those 2 tiny flickers of life, and felt something shift inside me. Not just love, that had been immediate and fierce from the moment I saw the positive test, but determination. Caleb thought I was infertile. He'd told everyone I was the problem. He'd built his entire post-divorce narrative on my supposed inadequacy. And now I was carrying twins. His twins, whether he acknowledged them or not. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Noah and Nora, I would name them later, lying in a hospital bed with my mother holding one hand and my best friend Maya holding the other, no father in sight. "Maya, how am I going to do this?" I whispered that night, both babies finally asleep in their bassinets after hours of crying. She squeezed my hand, her eyes fierce with loyalty. "The same way you've done everything else since he left. One day at a time. And you're not alone, Lena. You've never been alone." But I felt alone. Especially when I'd see Caleb's face on magazine covers, read articles about his groundbreaking surgeries, watch him be interviewed on local news about his philanthropic work. He was Brightwell's golden boy, and I was the ex-wife who couldn't give him what he wanted. The narrative he'd crafted was so effective that even people who'd known us both started to believe it. I'd see former colleagues at the grocery store and watch them avert their eyes. I'd overhear whispers at the clinic where I worked. Poor Caleb. He wanted children so badly. Such a shame she couldn't. No wonder he moved on. No one knew the truth except Dr. Samuel Rowan, and he was bound by medical confidentiality. Though he'd called me once, about 3 months into my pregnancy, his voice heavy with regret. Lena, I need you to know something. Off the record, as someone who considers you a friend. Caleb's fertility issues were significant. The fact that you conceived naturally, it's remarkable. Against the odds. You should know that. Why are you telling me this? I'd asked, my hand resting protectively over my barely showing belly. Because you deserve to know the truth. And because someday, when the time is right, the full truth needs to come out. Those medical records exist, Lena. And they tell a very different story than the one Caleb is selling. I'd thanked him and hung up, filing that information away for a future I couldn't yet imagine. I poured everything into my children. Noah with his thoughtful nature and endless questions about how things worked. Nora with her quiet creativity and the way she'd draw elaborate stories in crayon across any surface I'd let her. They had Caleb's dark eyes that turned amber in certain light, his sharp jawline, even the slight asymmetry in his smile. Looking at them was like looking at living proof of everything Caleb had denied. By the time they turned 5, I'd built a good life for us. Not an easy one, but a good one. I worked full-time at Brightwell Community Clinic, Maya helped with childcare, and my mother had moved closer to be part of their lives. The twins were thriving, happy, loved. And then the invitation arrived. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September when I found it mixed in with the bills and grocery store flyers. Heavy cream cardstock with embossed gold lettering, Harborcrest Medical Institute cordially invites you to the 5th anniversary gala celebrating the Center of Pediatric Excellence. My hands started shaking before I even finished reading. 5 years since the wing opened. 5 years since I'd last set foot in that building, back when I was still Mrs. Wright, back when I still believed my marriage could survive anything. Mom, what's that? Noah's voice pulled me back to the present. He stood in the kitchen doorway, backpack sliding off one shoulder, Nora right behind him. Both of them watching me with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. Just an invitation, sweetheart. To a fancy party at the hospital where Mommy used to work. Nora stepped closer, her voice cautious. The one where Dad works. My breath caught. The twins knew about Caleb in abstract terms. I told them age-appropriate truths, Daddy lives far away. Daddy has a different life. Daddy doesn't know about you because when Mommy told him, he didn't believe her. What I hadn't told them was that their father was Brightwell's most celebrated neurosurgeon. That his face was on billboards. That he'd remarried and, according to recent news I'd tried to avoid, his wife was pregnant. That he'd spent 6 years living a public lie while I raised his biological children alone. Yes, I knelt down to meet them at eye level. The one where your dad works. That evening, after the twins were in bed, Maya came over. She sat on my worn couch, wine glass in hand, staring at the invitation like it might explode. You're not seriously considering going. It wasn't a question. Maya knew me too well. I don't know. I curled into the opposite corner, my own glass untouched. Part of me wants to throw it away and pretend I never saw it. And the other part? I was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sounds of Noah and Nora's sleep machine humming through the wall, their breathing peaceful and innocent. The other part thinks maybe it's time. Time for him to see what actually happened. Time for the truth to finally have a voice. Maya leaned forward, her expression serious. Lena, you don't owe him anything. You've built a beautiful life for those kids without a single ounce of help from him. You survived his abandonment, his lies, the way he let everyone believe you were the problem. I know. My voice was steady despite the emotion tightening my throat. But this isn't about what I owe him. It's about what I owe myself. And what I owe Noah and Nora. I met her gaze directly. They deserve to know their father exists. Not some abstract concept I've created to protect them, but the real, flawed, complicated man who shares their DNA. And he deserves to. I paused, searching for the right words. He deserves to see exactly what his lies cost him. Maya studied me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Then you go. You walk in there with your head high, with those beautiful children at your side, and you let the truth speak for itself. What if he denies them? The fear I'd been holding at bay finally surfaced. What if he looks at Noah and Nora and still finds a way to make this my fault? Maya's voice was firm. Then everyone in that room will see exactly who he is. But Lena, those kids look exactly like him. I've seen the photos from when you were married. The resemblance is unmistakable. I knew she was right. The twins had inherited everything from Caleb. His distinctive dark eyes that shifted amber in sunlight. His sharp jawline. The exact shape of his ears. Even the way one corner of their mouths lifted slightly higher when they smiled. Looking at them was like looking at living, breathing proof of a man who'd convinced the world he couldn't father children naturally. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. The night before the gala, I stood in my modest bedroom, a simple navy dress laid across the bed, my hands shaking as I tried to imagine walking through those doors. In my mind, I could see it all, the glittering chandelier, the champagne flutes catching light, the elegantly dressed crowd. And somewhere in that carefully curated world, Caleb Wright, surrounded by admirers, his pregnant wife at his side, playing the role of the medical miracle after years of supposed infertility problems, that were supposedly mine. A gentle knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Noah and Nora stood in the doorway, already in their pajamas, twin expressions of concern on their small faces. Can't sleep. I opened my arms and they rushed forward, burrowing into my embrace with the easy trust of children who'd always known they were loved. Are you scared about tomorrow? Nora whispered against my shoulder. I pulled back to look at both of them. A little, I admitted honestly. Sometimes doing the right thing is also the scary thing. Will we really meet our dad? Noah's voice carried a mix of excitement and uncertainty that broke my heart. Yes, sweetheart. You will. What if he doesn't like us? Nora's question was so quiet, so vulnerable, that I had to blink back sudden tears. I cupped both their faces gently. Listen to me, both of you. You are brilliant, kind, funny, and absolutely perfect exactly as you are. If your father doesn't see that immediately, it's not because there's anything wrong with you. It's because sometimes people get so caught up in their own stories that they forget to look at what's really in front of them. Like when we play hide and seek and you walk right past us. Noah asked with the literal logic of a 5-year-old. I smiled despite the emotion clogging my throat. Exactly like that, baby. Exactly like that. After tucking them in, I returned to my room and stood before the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd signed divorce papers 6 years ago. Stronger. Wiser. Forged in the fire of single motherhood and public humiliation into something unbreakable. Tomorrow, I would walk into Caleb Wright's world not as the woman he discarded, but as the mother of his children. The children he didn't know existed because he'd chosen his pride over truth. Tomorrow, genetics would tell a truth that no amount of money or status could silence. Tomorrow, the story Caleb had been telling would finally crack open, and the light would pour in. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and whispered to my reflection, ready or not. The morning of the gala arrived with crisp autumn sunshine that felt almost mocking in its cheerfulness. I dressed carefully, helped Noah into his little suit and Nora into her flower print dress. Maya came over to do a final check, her eyes shining with emotion as she looked at the three of us. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. The drive to Harborcrest took 20 minutes but felt like an eternity. Noah asked questions the entire way about what a gala was, whether there would be cake, if Dad would be tall. Nora stayed quiet, her small hand finding mine in the back seat, her fingers cold despite the warm car. When we pulled up to the medical institute, my breath caught. The building looked exactly as I remembered, gleaming glass and modern architecture, the kind of place that screamed prestige and excellence. Valets in crisp uniforms opened car doors. Women in evening gowns and men in tailored suits streamed toward the entrance. For a moment, I almost turned around. Then Nora squeezed my hand and Noah said, "Wow, Mommy, this place is fancy." And I remembered why I was here. The lobby took my breath away. A massive chandelier hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting prismatic light across marble floors. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Classical music floated from hidden speakers. Everything was polished, perfect, expensive. I held Noah and Nora's hands tightly as we entered the main ballroom. The space was even more impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Brightwell's skyline. Round tables draped in white linens filled the room. A stage had been set up at the front, clearly for speeches and presentations. And that's when I saw him. Caleb stood near the stage, surrounded by a small crowd of admirers. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his dark hair styled just so, his posture radiating the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Next to him stood Vanessa, elegant in a flowing emerald gown that accentuated her rounded belly. They looked perfect together. The golden couple. The medical power duo expecting their miracle baby. Except I knew the truth. That baby wasn't conceived naturally. Couldn't have been. Not with Caleb's fertility issues. I felt my courage wavering. Then someone nearby noticed us. "Is that, oh my God, is that Lena Moore?" The whisper carried. Heads turned. I watched recognition ripple through the crowd. Former colleagues. Nurses I'd worked with. Doctors who'd witnessed my marriage's collapse. And Caleb. His head snapped up. His eyes found mine across the crowded room. I watched the color drain from his face as his gaze dropped to the two children standing beside me. Noah, ever friendly, waved. The room seemed to tilt. Caleb's champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The sound cut through the classical music like a gunshot. Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Caleb, what's wrong?" But he didn't answer. He was staring at Noah and Nora like he was seeing ghosts. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. His hands started to shake. Because there was no mistaking it. The twins looked exactly like him. Not similar. Not vaguely reminiscent. Exactly. Like someone had taken a photograph of Caleb at 5 years old and split it into two people. I walked forward, my children at my sides, my head held high. The crowd parted like water. Whispers followed us. "Those children look just like Dr. Wright. Do you see their eyes? That's impossible, isn't it?" We stopped 3 feet from where Caleb stood frozen. Up close, I could see the panic in his eyes, the way his breathing had gone shallow. Vanessa looked between us, confusion and something else, maybe recognition, crossing her elegant features. "Hello, Caleb." My voice was steady, calm, everything I'd practiced. "It's been a while." He finally found his voice, though it came out hoarse. "Lena. What are you doing here?" "I was invited." I gestured to the children. We all were. Noah stepped forward, his curiosity overcoming his shyness. "Are you our dad? Mommy said we'd finally get to meet you." The question hung in the air like a live wire. I watched Caleb's face cycle through emotions, shock, denial, fear, anger. His eyes darted around the room, suddenly aware that dozens of people were watching this unfold. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. He made his choice. The same choice he'd made 6 years ago, self-preservation over truth. They're not yours, Lena. His voice rang out across the ballroom, sharp and desperate. They can't be. You're the one who couldn't give me children. Remember? The crowd gasped. Camera phones appeared, recording everything. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. I felt Noah and Nora press against my sides, confused and frightened by the tension. But I didn't back down. Is that really the story you want to tell, Caleb? Here. Now. In front of all these witnesses. He stumbled backward, nearly knocking into Vanessa. It's the truth. We tried for years. The doctors confirmed it was you. Everyone here knows it was you. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. A familiar voice that made my heart soar with vindication. Actually, Caleb, I think it's time everyone here knew the real story. Dr. Samuel Rowan stepped forward from the crowd where he'd been standing, watching, waiting for this exact moment. He held a manila folder in his weathered hands, his expression grave but determined. Caleb's eyes went wide with panic. Samuel, don't. The records that prove, Dr. Rowan continued, his calm tone cutting through Caleb's desperation like a scalpel, that you were diagnosed with severely compromised sperm quality and motility 7 years ago. That your fertility specialist, me, gave you less than a 5% chance of natural conception. He opened the folder, pulling out official-looking documents. The records that show Lena was cleared as completely fertile. That every test she underwent came back normal, healthy, perfectly capable of conception. Dr. Rowan's voice grew stronger. And the records that prove you chose to hide your diagnosis. That you specifically requested I keep running tests on Lena, looking for problems that didn't exist, while you secretly underwent treatment to improve your own fertility. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive ballroom. 200 people stood frozen, processing what they'd just heard. Vanessa turned to stare at her husband, her face draining of color. What is he talking about? Caleb's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Those records are sealed. You can't, this is a violation of. Of what? Dr. Rowan's voice was steel. Patient confidentiality. You mean the confidentiality you violated when you told everyone Lena was infertile? When you let her carry that shame for 6 years while you built a career on sympathy? He held up the documents for everyone to see. These records show that while your natural conception chances were extremely low, they weren't 0. 5% became 8% after treatment. Then 10%. Still a long shot, but not impossible. Dr. Rowan looked directly at Noah and Nora. And clearly, against the odds, it happened. Someone in the crowd shouted, if Dr. Wright had such severe fertility issues, how is his wife pregnant? Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper, but in the shocked silence that followed, everyone heard it. IVF. With donor sperm. She looked at Caleb, tears streaming down her face. You told me it was just to increase our chances. You told me we were doing it together, as partners. You never told me. Her voice grew stronger, angrier. You never told me that you were the one with the problem. You let me believe the story about your first wife. You built our entire relationship on a lie. Caleb reached for her. Vanessa, please, I can explain. She stepped back, her hand protectively over her belly. Don't touch me. Then she turned to me, her eyes red but clear. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. All this time, I thought. She shook her head. I'm so sorry. Before I could respond, she pulled the wedding ring from her finger and set it on the nearest table. Then she walked out of the ballroom, her head high despite the tears, leaving Caleb standing alone in the wreckage of his lies. The crowd closed in, questions flying from every direction. Reporters who'd been covering the gala as a society event suddenly had a scandal. Colleagues who believed Caleb's version of events for years now faced the truth. Dr. Wright, is this true? Did you really let your ex-wife take the blame? Those children, are they yours? Caleb looked around wildly, searching for an escape route. His eyes landed on Noah and Nora, who were pressed against my legs, overwhelmed by the chaos. For just a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Not remorse exactly, but recognition. He was looking at them, really looking at them, seeing his own features reflected back with undeniable precision. The same eyes. The same jaw. The same slightly asymmetrical smile. Living proof of the 10% chance that had beaten the 90% odds. Then his corporate training kicked in. His expression smoothed into the charming mask I remembered so well. Ladies and gentlemen, this is clearly a private matter that's been taken out of context. I'm sure we can all agree that a gala celebrating medical excellence isn't the appropriate venue for personal drama. If you'll excuse me. He tried to walk away. Dr. Rowan's voice stopped him. Running away again, Caleb. Just like you did 6 years ago when I told you there was still a chance, however small, that you could father children naturally. When you decided it was easier to blame Lena than admit you had a problem. Caleb spun around, his mask slipping to reveal the anger underneath. You had no right to keep those records. No right to bring them here. I had every right. Dr. Rowan's voice was quiet but it carried. Because I took an oath, first, do no harm. And watching you destroy Lena's reputation, watching her struggle to raise those children alone while you were celebrated as some kind of tragic figure, that was harm. Preventable harm. He looked around at the assembled crowd. These people deserve to know the truth. Lena deserves to have her name cleared. And those children deserve to know their father. Even if he doesn't deserve them. The words landed like blows. I watched Caleb's composure finally crack. His shoulders sagged. His hands came up to cover his face. When he looked up again, there were tears in his eyes. Whether they were genuine or performative, I couldn't tell. Lena. His voice broke. I don't know what to say. I knelt down and pulled Noah and Nora close, shielding them from the cameras and the chaos. You don't have to say anything to me, Caleb. But you owe these children an explanation. You owe them the truth. Noah, brave and confused, spoke up. Mommy says you didn't know about us. Is that true? I watched Caleb struggle with the answer. The truth was complicated. No, he hadn't known about the pregnancy continuing. But he'd also refused to believe me when I told him. He'd chosen his narrative over my reality. Finally, he said, I didn't know. I should have listened to your mother when she told me. I should have believed her. I should have. He stopped, unable to finish. Nora, always more cautious, asked the question that mattered most. Do you want to know us now? The ballroom had gone completely silent. Everyone waited for Caleb's answer. This was the moment. The choice that would define everything that came after. Caleb looked at his children, really looked at them, for the first time. I saw the recognition in his eyes. The undeniable resemblance. The truth he could no longer avoid. The genetic lottery that had beaten his statistical odds and created two perfect, beautiful human beings. Yes. His voice was barely audible. Yes, I want to know you. If this story is resonating with you, if you've ever been blamed for something that wasn't your fault or had your truth silenced by someone else's lies, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that vindication is possible. Drop a comment telling me what part of Lena's story hit home for you. Because your engagement helps spread these important messages to people who desperately need to hear them. 2 weeks after the gala, I received a certified letter. Caleb Wright was filing for joint custody of Noah and Nora. Maya sat across from me at my kitchen table as I read the legal documents, her expression murderous. He has some nerve. After everything, after abandoning you, denying them, publicly humiliating you, now he wants custody. My hands shook as I set down the papers. He's trying to control the narrative again. If he becomes the involved father now, he can spin this as a misunderstanding. As him stepping up once he knew the truth. What are you going to do? I looked at my children, playing in the living room, completely unaware that their world was about to become a legal battlefield. I'm going to fight. Not to keep them from him, but to make sure any relationship they have is built on truth and therapy and actual change. I hired an attorney that afternoon. We filed a counter-petition. Primary custody for me, structured visitation for Caleb, mandatory family therapy, a demand for accountability. The court date was set for 6 weeks later. Those 6 weeks were among the hardest of my life. Caleb's attorneys painted me as vindictive, as someone who'd hidden his children out of spite. They tried to argue that his ignorance of their existence was my fault for not trying harder to reach him. My attorney was brilliant. She presented phone records showing my attempts to contact him. Text messages where he denied paternity. Dr. Rowan's medical records proving Caleb had known about his fertility issues before we divorced. Most damning of all, she presented the psychological evaluation. Caleb Wright shows clear patterns of narcissistic behavior, the official report read. He prioritizes public image over genuine connection. He demonstrates an inability to accept responsibility for his actions. He shows a concerning pattern of manipulation and reality distortion. But the most powerful moment came during Vanessa's testimony. She sat in the witness box, no longer pregnant, having given birth to a healthy baby girl 2 weeks earlier. She looked tired but resolute. Did your ex-husband tell you about Lena Moore? Caleb's attorney asked. Yes. Vanessa's voice was steady. He told me she was unable to have children. That it was the reason their marriage failed. That he'd wanted a family desperately but she couldn't give him one. And did you believe him? I had no reason not to. He seemed genuinely heartbroken when he talked about it. When we decided to pursue IVF with donor sperm, he framed it as us healing together from his past disappointment. When did you learn the truth? At the gala. When Dr. Rowan presented the medical records. How did that make you feel? Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. Betrayed. Used. Furious. I'd built my entire relationship with him on a foundation of lies. I'd married him believing we were partners in healing. Instead, I was just another prop in his carefully constructed image. She looked directly at Caleb. He didn't want a family. He wanted the appearance of a family. The sympathy of being a man denied fatherhood. The admiration when he finally achieved it. When it was my turn to testify, I told the truth. All of it. The years of being blamed for our infertility. The divorce and his immediate denial of the twins. The 6 years of raising them alone while he built his reputation on a lie. But I also told them something else. I don't want to punish Caleb by keeping him from Noah and Nora. Despite everything he's done, they deserve the opportunity to know their father. But that relationship has to be built on honesty. On therapy. On him doing the actual work to become the parent they deserve, not just playing the role for public consumption. The judge listened carefully. Took notes. Asked pointed questions. Then came the moment that changed everything. We were in a brief recess. I was in the hallway with Maya and my attorney when we heard raised voices from one of the conference rooms. Caleb and his legal team, arguing. Suddenly, Caleb's voice rose above the others, sharp with frustration. This is ridiculous. I don't have time for supervised visitation and family therapy. I have surgeries scheduled, speaking engagements, a career to maintain. There was a pause, then his attorney's measured response. If you want any custody at all, you'll make time. I don't even know these kids. What am I supposed to talk to them about? Building blocks and cartoons. Another voice, probably a different attorney. Perhaps you should have thought of that before filing for custody. Caleb's response was cold, calculated. I filed for custody because my reputation can't survive being seen as a deadbeat father. Not because I actually want to play house with Lena's children. Those kids are just, they're evidence of my failure. A reminder that I couldn't control the narrative. The silence that followed was broken by Maya's sharp intake of breath. We all stood frozen, processing what we just heard. Then I realized, the door to the conference room was slightly ajar. And just inside, someone was holding a phone. Recording. My attorney moved quickly, pulling out her own phone to capture the audio still filtering into the hallway. Caleb was still talking, his voice bitter and revealing. The whole thing is a disaster. Vanessa's lawsuit is going to cost me millions. The hospital board is considering removing me from leadership positions. All because of some statistical improbability I never wanted to acknowledge in the first place. The judge reconvened court 20 minutes later. My attorney requested permission to present new evidence. Audio evidence. When the recording played in that courtroom, I watched Caleb's face cycle through emotions, shock, horror, panic. His attorneys immediately objected, claiming illegal recording, invasion of privacy. But the damage was done. The judge's expression turned glacial as she listened to Caleb dismiss his children as evidence of failure and a threat to his reputation. When the audio ended, she removed her glasses and looked directly at Caleb. Mr. Wright, in my 30 years on the bench, I have seen many custody disputes. I have seen parents fight viciously over children they love. I have seen parents struggle with complicated emotions about children from failed relationships. But I have never, in all those years, heard a parent refer to their children with such cold calculation. She put her glasses back on. Here is my ruling. Ms. Moore is awarded full primary custody. Mr. Wright will have supervised visitation rights, 2 hours per week, contingent upon his completion of a minimum of 6 months of therapy focused on parental attachment and narcissistic behavioral patterns. She paused, letting that sink in. Furthermore, Mr. Wright will be required to make monthly child support payments retroactive to the children's birth, plus an additional contribution to a college fund for both children. This court finds that while Ms. Moore raised these children without support, Mr. Wright was building wealth that morally, if not legally, should have been supporting his biological offspring. Caleb started to protest, but his attorney grabbed his arm, shaking his head firmly. Finally, the judge looked at Noah and Nora, who'd been waiting outside with a court-appointed guardian. I want to meet these children who've been at the center of all this. They were brought in, small and nervous. The judge's expression softened. Hello, Noah. Hello, Nora. Do you know who I am? They both nodded. Nora whispered, You're the judge. You're deciding about our dad. That's right. Can I ask you both a question? Another nod. Do you want to spend time with your father? Noah answered first, his voice thoughtful. I think so. Mommy says he's not bad, just confused. And he has our eyes. Nora was more hesitant. Only if Mommy says it's safe. And only if he really wants to, not just because he has to. The judge smiled, sad but genuine. You two are very wise. Much wiser than many of the adults in this room. She looked at Caleb. Your children are willing to give you a chance, Mr. Wright. I suggest you don't waste it. Court was adjourned. Walking out of that courthouse, with primary custody secured and my children's future protected, I felt something I hadn't felt in 6 years, peace. Not happiness exactly. The situation was still complicated. Noah and Nora would still have to navigate a relationship with a father who denied them. Caleb would still have to reckon with the consequences of his choices. But the truth was out. My name was cleared. And my children were safe. 6 months passed. Caleb attended therapy as mandated. The supervised visitations began, awkward and stilted at first. He'd show up to the family center where they met, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes, clearly unsure how to interact with 5-year-olds. The first few sessions were painful to watch through the one-way glass. He'd ask them questions like he was interviewing job candidates. What are your favorite subjects? Do you play any sports? What do you want to be when you grow up? Noah and Nora would answer politely but with growing distance. They could sense his discomfort, his lack of genuine interest. Then something shifted. It was the 8th or 9th visit. Caleb showed up looking different, tired, less polished. He sat down across from the twins and said something I never expected to hear. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be your father. I missed everything, your first steps, your first words, 5 years of birthdays. I can't get that back and I don't know how to move forward. The honesty seemed to surprise all 3 of them. Nora, always the emotional one, said softly, you could just play with us. That's what mommies and daddies do. Play. Caleb looked confused. She pulled out her coloring book. I'll show you. And for the first time, Caleb Wright sat on the floor with his daughter and colored. Badly. He couldn't stay in the lines and his color choices made no sense. But he tried. Noah, watching, eventually joined them. He brought over his building blocks. Want to make a tower? I'm not very good at this, Caleb admitted. That's okay, Noah's smile was encouraging. We can teach you. The supervised visitation supervisor, a woman named Claire who'd seen hundreds of these cases, later told me, that was the first time I saw him actually connect with them. Not perform. Not manage his image. Just be present. The progress was slow. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There were setbacks, times when Caleb would revert to his old patterns, treating the visits like obligations rather than opportunities. But gradually, something changed. Not in Noah and Nora, they remained steady, open but cautious. The change was in Caleb. His therapist, Dr. Patricia Ng, called me for a court-mandated progress update. He's doing the work, she said, sounding almost surprised. He's confronting some very uncomfortable truths about himself. His relationship with his own father, his fear of inadequacy, the way he used control and image to avoid genuine vulnerability. Do you think he can really change? I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. I think he's trying. And sometimes, trying is where real change begins. 9 months after the custody ruling, on a Saturday morning in early summer, I took Noah and Nora to Brightwell Park for their weekly visit with Caleb. The court had recently approved unsupervised visits in public spaces, a significant step forward. I watched from a bench as Caleb approached. He looked different from the polished surgeon who'd stood at that gala. More human. More humble. Hey, guys. He greeted them with genuine warmth. Ready for the park? Can we go on the swings? Nora asked. Absolutely. As they ran ahead, Caleb lingered by my bench. Lena, can we talk? Just for a minute. I nodded, gesturing for him to sit. He did, keeping a respectful distance. I want to apologize. Properly. Not because my therapist told me to or because it's part of the court agreement. Because I need you to know. He took a breath. I was a coward. I let you take the blame for something that was my inadequacy. I built a life on that lie and I destroyed yours in the process. There's no excuse for that. None. I waited, letting him continue. I missed everything. Their first 5 years. And I can never get that back. But I'm trying now. Really trying. Not to rebuild my reputation or look good for the hospital board, just to know them. To be their father in whatever capacity they'll allow. He looked at me, his eyes holding genuine remorse. You're an incredible mother, Lena. They're amazing because of you. And I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. I sat with his words for a moment, then replied, I don't know if I can forgive you, Caleb. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did was devastating. But I can acknowledge that you're trying. And for their sake, I hope you keep trying. He nodded, accepting this. That's more than I deserve. Probably, I allowed myself a small smile. But they deserve a father who shows up. So keep showing up. Across the playground, Noah called out, Dad, come push us on the swings. Dad. The word hung in the air between us. The first time either twin had called him that. Caleb's eyes filled with tears. They called me Dad. They did, I confirmed. Don't make them regret it. I won't. I promise I won't. He stood and walked toward his children, toward the relationship he'd almost destroyed before it began, toward the long work of earning a title he'd once taken for granted. I watched them together, Caleb pushing the swings, Noah and Nora's laughter ringing out across the park. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the family I'd once imagined. But it was real. Honest. Built on truth rather than lies. And maybe that was enough. As I prepared to leave, I noticed a familiar figure approaching, Vanessa, pushing a stroller with a sleeping baby inside. She hesitated when she saw me, clearly unsure of her welcome. I waved her over. She sat beside me, both of us watching Caleb with the twins. They're beautiful, she said softly. I'm sorry I never got to say that properly before. Thank you. And congratulations on your daughter. We sat in companionable silence for a moment. Then Vanessa said, I need you to know I had no idea about any of it. I thought. I know what you thought, I interrupted gently. Caleb is very good at crafting narratives. She laughed bitterly. That he is. Was. She corrected herself. I don't know who he is now. If this change is real or just another performance. I've wondered the same thing, I admitted. But I think maybe it doesn't matter. As long as he shows up for them, as long as he does the work, the why becomes less important than the what. Vanessa watched Caleb lift Nora onto the monkey bars, his face concentrated with concern for her safety. He never looked at me like that, she observed. Like I was precious. Fragile. Worth protecting. He looked at me like I was a trophy to display. I'm sorry, I meant it. No one deserves that. Neither did you. She met my eyes. I read the court transcripts. Everything he said about you. I'm ashamed I ever believed him. You had no reason not to. Still. She paused. For what it's worth, you're stronger than I could ever be. Raising them alone all those years. You'd be surprised what you're capable of when you have no other choice. Her baby stirred in the stroller. Vanessa leaned down to adjust the blanket, her expression soft with the kind of love I recognized instantly, the fierce, protective, all-consuming love of motherhood. I should go, she said, standing. But Lena, thank you. For being gracious when you had every right to be cruel. We're all just trying to survive the damage Caleb caused, I replied. No point in adding to it. After she left, I sat alone for a while longer, watching my children play with their father, this imperfect, complicated man who was trying to become someone worthy of their love. Life, I thought, rarely gives us the endings we imagine. The perfect revenge, the total vindication, the villain brought completely low. Sometimes it gives us something messier. More human. A slow healing. A grudging progress. A future built from the rubble of the past. And sometimes, that was enough. Before we close this story, I need you to hear something important. If you're watching this and you've been blamed for someone else's failures, if you've been made the villain in a story you didn't write, if you've raised children alone while someone else took credit or avoided responsibility, I want you to know something. Your truth matters. Lena's vindication didn't come from being louder or crueler than Caleb. It came from standing firm in her truth and protecting her children while the lies eventually collapsed under their own weight. You don't have to fight to be heard. Sometimes you just have to stand still long enough for the truth to catch up. Subscribe to Mr. Steven's Stories right now if this message resonated with you. Help this channel grow so we can reach more people who need to hear stories like Lena's. Share this video with someone who's fighting their own battle for truth. And tell me in the comments, what part of this story hit home for you? Because your story matters too. And maybe, someday, it needs to be told. Lena Moore didn't get the fairy tale ending. She got something better. She got her truth acknowledged, her children protected, and the quiet dignity that comes from surviving something that should have destroyed you. She got to look in the mirror and recognize the woman staring back, strong, vindicated, whole. And in the end, that was worth more than any apology Caleb Wright could ever offer. The truth, as it turns out, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be patient. Because lies may run fast, but truth always catches up. And when it does, the whole world stops to listen.